Hello everyone. In this tutorial I just want to update on what I did in the previous tutorial, which I'll link in the video now. If you recall, in the previous tutorial we did a procedural asset. In this case we did an asteroid, like a giant rock or something like that, and we saved that to disk, the high res version, and we used tops to poly reduce and auto UV and bake out attributes off of the high res, such as the extracting the displacement, the tangent space normals, custom attributes such as custom occlusion, curvature, and anything like that. They were all baked down from the high res onto low res in rasterized into UV space. And then we made a USD asset from that. So we were able to create a main USD asset like asteroid.usd, and then underneath that we had all the geometry variants and things like that. But we weren't really using, we were just kind of creating our own hierarchy, and that wouldn't really conform to the ASWF USD working group guidelines. Mouthful, right? Of the old USD society. So the sidefx do actually offer this in the component builder, which will allow you to bring in any geometry and assign a material. You put materials in here and you assign the material, and then you can output that, and we can take advantage of all of this. There's quite a lot happening in here, and sidefx have gone into great detail about what's happening within all of these, and it's quite interesting, very complicated, and this is why they've invented this. But it does have a bit of a limitation in terms of you do one at a time. So if I had like 20 odd asteroids, I could bring in asteroid 1 here and then copy this. Then I think you would need a component, not component geometry, a geometry component, this component variant. And as you start to copy and paste and place in your geometry in here, you can name these, and this would be the variant name, and then you can add materials and assign materials, and it's really nice. But if you've got like quite a lot of assets, it can be a little bit fiddly, which is what I had. I basically created a bunch of assets in the previous project. So if I just go over to my new project here, and all I've done is copy some files from previous projects. So in assets in here, I've got this asteroid, and the results of the previous tutorial, we had a high and a low res, but I only need the low res at this point. And we had a lot of geometry files, and associated with that we had texture files as well. So we had a texture for each and every one. You can see there's some rats in there as well, which is just the auto conversion from Solaris. We do discuss putting those in their own folder and automating that, generating them from the EXRs in the previous tutorial. So I thought, well, let's try again. Let's try and see whether, instead of, let's say that I wanted to just take some files from disk and do something to them, and then assign a bunch of existing textures. So that's exactly what we've got in here. We've got the geometry, and you can see it's all organized and named, and it's a certain format. So my recommendation would be to, whatever you're going to do with the geometry first, is just make sure that it's kind of at least named. I mean, the naming isn't important in what I'm going to do anyway, but I am going to just use this format, and I'll show you how I'm doing all of that. Same with the textures. It's easier if the texture maps are actually kind of named sensibly to start with. It's just going to make things a little bit more predictable. So this is kind of what I came up with as a temporary thing until I learn a lot more about USD. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the component builder here, and I'm going to import, and all I'm doing at the top level here is I'm subdividing this geometry here, and you can see in the viewport we have a low representation here, which is this is the render mesh, and then we can switch this back to the preview mesh, which is for the viewport, which is the proxy. So this is the purpose. So this sets this up for you automatically in there. So that's quite a good thing straight away from using the component builder. I'm bringing in a custom attribute here, and I'll talk about that later. It's not part really essential for this tutorial. So I'll just dive in and show you exactly what's going on inside. So I read the geometry in, but I actually have a path linked to this Python script here called dislogic. And what I'm going to do in this code, and there's the code for you to look at, is I'm going to provide a location. So my job and assets, and then AN is the asset name. If you remember, we use the alias and variables just to declare, to declare a variable called asteroid A just for this one Houdini session. So if I middle click, it'll resolve to this really long path, and you'll see the asteroid A falls after the word assets, which is here. And then I'm just pointing to a version 2. Now, the reason I'm doing that is there's 1 and 2 is a copy of 1 with just 4 of them in, because this is going to loop through, and I just want to make sure it works before it starts doing any kind of serious processing. And 4 should be okay, I think, in this case. So I'm just saying, basically, in this Python code, look in this folder and sort me out everything in there, and I'm filtering out everything that is literally a .bgl. Now, I recently added this filter because in that folder, and you can't see it because it's hidden, but there is a file called .dsstore or some kind of Mac rubbish in there, and the script was finding that and it was breaking everything. So I'm literally just filtering this out. So if you had OBJs, you could just put OBJ here. And then I'm organizing that list so it's numerical order, which is what's happening up here, because I also found out that the list was being read in the order of the list. So my list wasn't necessarily being concatenated in a numerical order, but the indexes were still valid. So it was saying something like, asteroid A, this is in the list, for example, asteroid A underscore 1, then underscore 0, and then 2 and 3. But the indexes for what I'm using were using 0, 1, 2, and 3. And it took me a while to figure it out because the texture maps weren't mapping correctly or anything like that. And then I just realized when I looked at the list, it must have been that. And I'll talk about that in just a second because it's a little bit abstract what I'm talking about. But this code here, I'm going to create an attribute called files, and I'm going to store everything in this files. So let's see if this works. If I can see this in my geometry spreadsheet, and it would be in a details thing. So this Python script is returning what's in files here. So you can see this asteroid A. I don't know if you can see this, but it's basically in order now as well. So that's going to be a list, and we can use that to map against like an index of 0, 1, 2, and 3. So that's essentially got me everything on disk, and it's got me the names in a list. So that's quite nice because I could use those names later on for things as well. So all I'm doing down here is now you've got the geometry in SOPs. You won't actually see the geometry unless you preview. If I just press U, it's actually working now, but sometimes it doesn't work because you have to like evaluate the for each loop. But what's going to happen is this read node is going to take this location, and you can see this line here. This is a channel reference, so it's going to the disk logic here to the directory that I made. So it's a fake directory here, which is like kind of empty, but then I'm going to fill it in with the value of @iteration. So the @iteration is part of the loop that we have sitting up in here. So it's going to basically come through here. So we're going to talk about that in a second. So you can put your geometry in, and then you can do what you want to your geometry. So in this case, I've just added an attribute called variant based on the integer. I don't really need the +1 actually. So it's just going to cycle through each one and give each one a variant. I'm just testing this out. I'm going to create a rest position, and I'm actually just going to name this geometry to asteroid. I can't remember what the original name was. It probably is asteroid, to be honest with you. It's it did have probably a unique name or something. So I'm just going to name this to just asteroid. So just showing that you can name this and manipulate that here. And then as usual, you have the output geometry and you have the proxy, and then you can make a sim mesh. So the proxy is great, but it will try to process the poly reduction every time we iterate. So sometimes I will disable this while I'm doing the tests and then just re-enable this back again. So what we've got now is we've got some options to add some render attributes here, but we have a material library, and I've stuck 3 different materials in, and we'll talk about those in a second. And then I'm configuring that. I just want to save that material down to a location, and this kind of made it work. We're not actually entirely sure why, but I think I'll have to look into that a little bit more. But I'm basically going to make sure that I get a location for my materials for every iteration of geometry. So I'm going to reference the materials into this kind of standard hierarchy here. So you can see that before we had the standard hierarchy down here, and now we've referenced in the materials so we can start doing some things with them. So it's the standard assign material. So I'm assigning the material to the asset here. So I don't need any fancy naming because this is all in its own little environment and little hierarchy. And then I'm just doing $OS because my materials and my name are the same. So that is something that you can do if you want. So you can see I've got this name. So it's going to go and just auto find and assign these materials. And then this is just some color I've added. So it's just going to color each one just to help me later on just to visualize. It's not totally essential at all. It's not going to affect the rendering or anything like that. But whatever name is coming in here, it will call this it might call this the variant. This will become the variant. So what I've done is I've basically just added the expression to take the name and then iterate through. So it'll go through however many iterations we have on disk. So it'll just say we've got 4 assets coming in, which the count, the iteration is defined by the list in the files. So we have like 4 files. So it'll go through and it'll just kind of label each material based off of that iteration value, which is kind of defined in here. And we're iterating over strings. So I'm using this details attribute, and it's importing to it's going right back up inside of here into this logic, right back up here, and it's basically finding the files attribute that we had earlier, and it's reading that to iterate over that list, that organized list. So in theory, what should happen is it should loop through, and we should get the material assigned, and it'll be the last material that gets assigned. It's just metal. You can see it's already been assigned. And we should have the variant. Where is it? The one I wanted. We should get like a. Oops. We should be able to right click and see the gold has been assigned to the 4 pieces. So we have a gold material for each one, and an iron and a metal. So I just made these up. I haven't really looked at these at all, but I'll talk about them in just a second. So then we can basically save this out, and we can take advantage of all of the stuff sidefx have provided. Like we get a little turntable camera in here just to kind of get a nice thumbnail. So I've basically just provided a light, and I am spinning the light just off the frame just so I can quickly do a little bit of look dev in an environment here. I did find that when you are doing look development in here, it can get a little bit slow, because if you have 50 of them and you've got the poly reduce on here, it can, every time you make a parameter change inside of your material network, so if I'm in here in iron and I'm like kind of trying to do something, it will kind of pause a little bit every time, like so, and it'll try to poly reduce everything, which can be quite just, it's not a very nice experience. So the way I kind of did that when I was look deving this, I kind of strip it back a little bit, and I'm not sure if this is the best way. I just press Y and I cut this process off here. So we are just importing the four. I'll just press U, but we're importing the four, and you can see it's gone to the heavier mesh now, the render geometry. So we're importing the four in, and then I would just press Y, and I would just kill those like so. So I would just look dev on the one material, and in fact, if I wanted to make sure I'm just looking at the iron material, you can actually unexport, and you'll see them disappearing from the hierarchy temporarily. So I can now come in here and I'll be looking at the iron, and it's the last version of the model. So if I wanted to change that model, I could make sure this is live. So this switch node is going to feed up here, and I should be able to now find the material variant and find the geometry variant that I want to kind of look dev. So I could start to switch on Karma and render this. So let's think. I think that means it's missing a texture, possibly. So if I talk about the textures, what I've done here is I've created a path here. So this is just going to the texture folder version 2, which actually no longer exists. So this is why. So I'm just going to quickly, what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to change all of these paths back, because when I did some look dev earlier, I had a texture 2 version with just the same amount of textures in, but you don't really need it. You can actually have the full range of textures in here. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to grab shift select these, and I'm just going to bring this back to 1 like so. And I mean, hopefully that should bring in the textures again. So there we go. So I probably need to do that for all of them. So these texture paths are all the same in here. And if you remember, they're just being defined by a unique name, whoops, in here, like color. So you can see that it's taking this map name here and it's here. Then everything else is the same. So it means I can copy and paste this path into any file image node, and it'll just work, providing I change the name. Because my textures are on disk, they are all named in a sensible way like that. So you could asteroid underscore a, which is the variable an, and then the iteration value, and then the name here, color, is the actual name I've put up there. So it's just something that quickly gets you where you need to be. Now I haven't look dev these too much, but when I was look deving these, it was a little bit slow because the amount of iterations were quite high. So the list was like 50 objects and it was trying to poly reduce them all. So I just thought, okay, that's a little bit silly to kind of do it that way. So I will just remove the poly reduction for now and just iterate on one material quickly just to see how things look. So if I kind of look, you can kind of at least throw some stuff on there. So these maps are the ones we baked from the previous tutorial. So I've got the normal, the height, and a color, and then I'm just messing around with things. Again, not an award-winning setup here, just proving that we have a material version that can be applied. So these textures loop through each model. So if I come back up now, and what I'll just quickly do is I will quickly just, because I know this is going to catch me out in just a few seconds, I'll just quickly, and I should have done this before the video, I'll just make sure that's on 1 as well. I think it might be. And I'll make sure this and this file path is on 1. It's very messy network, and I do apologize. I don't usually but I just came up with the idea last night. I thought maybe this is something that will work. So this is live, by the way, so this is not actually being committed to disk right now. So what we should be able to do is if I go to the, and we're only viewing like one material, but it'll assign the material 4 times and give each material a unique texture path, which is what we need because each model has a unique UV set which needs those textures. So the color, for example, if we bring up here, and I might struggle for space here, but let's just see how we get on. If I hover, if you see it says version 1, and that matches the name of the material. So if I drop that to version 2, that matches the name now to 2. So it's changing the right material. So it's going through the material, the textures within that material, and assigning them correctly. And you can see it's doing it there. So it's actually mapped perfectly now, which is the problem I had earlier, was it wasn't actually mapping correctly because my list wasn't in order with my index attribute count. So that's that. So what I will do now is I will just kill the render, and I will plug in, I will export again. So these export flags, if you watch down here, you export them into the USD environment so that people can pick them up. So you can do that, and it's quite nice. And I just do that when I'm look dev in particular things, and I will forget, but it's just one of the things you'll have to remember to do. And I'm going to plug that in here, and I'm going to plug that in there. So now we're going to have the ability to, it will have assigned the 3 materials to each and every one of those input geometries in that files list. Because of this little expression in here, like so. So what we can do now is just check it's still working. Now you get a little message here because it's going to complain about me animating stuff, but it really doesn't matter because I'm not going to save that, I don't think. So we can see the gold, and the gold falls under the green category. So any of those will be green, and then we've got the iron, which was red, and the metal, which is blue. So if we did like an explore variants here, we just make sure this is going to explore those variants. You can see that we've got 3 materials, and each one is kind of going to have a unique shader attached to them. A unique texture assigned within that material. So I'll just center that to the middle of the world there. So if I press W now, you should see that you can see the textures have been applied to the gold. It's like gold metal thing. Again, I spent like literally a minute on each material. I just wanted to prove that they work. So yeah, so that's kind of like, it is working here. So that's all very good. And because I've already got rats that copied over with here, there was no kind of wait time. But that, if you didn't have rats, then you would have to wait a little bit while Houdini converted them for you, and it would switch out the textures within any of these 2 rats, which it has done, but you will notice it won't look any different. But it is actually reading the rat file, unless you just exclusively move this to a rat file yourself. So let's say we're happy with this now. The first thing I would do is I would re-establish my, because I don't want to send out just the render geometry. I don't want people to be using the render geometry in the viewport. They wouldn't be happy about that. So I would poly reduce this to something, and then excuse me, I could provide a sim mesh. You can do this later as well. I'll just leave it off for the sake of I'll do it. All I'm doing is I'm shrink wrapping. Let me just space G in the viewport. I'm shrink wrapping this. There's many ways you can do this, and I'm just doing a remesh. So there you go, some sim geometry. I think that might be okay for like a bullet thing, and for this will be good for the when you save the USD out into individual variant geometry libraries. So you could save out each material could be saved out as individual USD. You can use that in the LOP layout and things like that. And this the physics attributes within the LOPs nodes would use this, I think, for the dynamics, I believe. So if I just switch this back now and I press up, we're going to get a bit of a wait time. There you go. It wasn't too bad, actually. And it's now converted them to the proxy in the viewport, like so. And then when it comes to saving, I've basically created a little version tab here, and it's the standard stuff that you can find on sidefx's website, all the tutorials about how to do this. But I'm just saving to my location here. So I'm going to save that to this project. So I've got this project, disk to USD geo. So I've set my job to this. So, and I'm going to save under assets. Sorry about this. And I'm going to save it under here. So it's just going to go under USD. So that's pretty much what all that is here. So I'm going to localize external non-USD files. I'm going to put all my textures into a textures folder, and the variant set, well, the one we created, I called it MTL. So we're going to export that into the variants folder. So this is what's really good about using this. Oh, and you can generate a thumbnail. So let's just see how far we get. If I save that to disk, that should save a USD asset to disk. So let's just quickly take a peek. And yeah, it's doing the right thing. So we have the main USD file here, and we actually get a payload, which is really cool. We'll talk about that in just a second, which is what I was kind of missing in the previous one, because I didn't compare to the standards and I didn't build everything how it should be. But it turns out there's a lot you need to do. So the nice thing is we get all the textures, and if you remember previously I mentioned I actually kind of labeled them sensibly so that there's no duplicates in here. And interestingly enough, it's converted the EXRs. It's not copied over the rats. So if you give this to someone, you know, they will get EXR files because that was the original file. So that's quite clever of Houdini not to put clutter in there with the rat files. And then you've got the variant layers. So these are the things that I think it would add to the gallery. If I, now this is done, if I add this to my gallery, so if you go to the asset layout gallery, and I have created a new location, a new gallery just to try this. I don't know if you've got any thumbnails or anything, so that might be nice as well. So where would we find that? Gosh, I wonder if this would generate a thumbnail. I didn't have regenerate thumbnail on export, which I think I should have had on, but that might slow things down. So I'm going to generate a thumbnail, and it should loop through each of those variants and render a thumbnail. Now I'm not sure how long that's going to take, but I would imagine if it's worked, it would save them. It saved one thumbnail. I don't know if that's useful. Maybe I should save to disk one more time. Maybe that will trigger that to generate a thumbnail for each one in that kind of variant layers, material layer. So it looks like my computer's hanging now, so I'm going to hopefully not crash. So it's not crashing, it's actually saving a thumbnail out with each and every one. So you've got these little bits of rock here. So this might be one of those things that if you've got a lot, just expect this to take a little bit of time, but at least you don't have to pipeline this. This is kind of coming through with sidefx's component builder, which is a work of art, really. It's amazing. There's a lot going off behind it that I'm digging into because I kind of want to know more about USD. It's obviously it's a big thing because I haven't used it. I came from a company that didn't use USD. I was in a company for a long time. They didn't use USD at all, and it's kind of new to me. So I'm still kind of going through it. But it was like a major blocker when I started doing projects. And then I found it really frustrating at first, but then I suddenly realized how cool it is, but there's quite a big learning curve. So I'm trying to get through as much as I can. And I thought I'll show some videos of me struggling with it and see whether it helps anyone at all. Because I'm not a massive pipeline guy. I have worked as a creature effects artist for a long time, and it was at Framestore. And before that, I was in commercials as a generalist using Houdini and Maya. But when I was in Framestore in creature effects, it was all Maya. So I just use Houdini in a personal level. But now I'm freelance and I'm back fully in Houdini. Things have changed so much, and the learning curves again increased, which it's fun and it's great to see what's happening. But I think Houdini might have returned. So it has returned. So we have got a thumbnail. So now if I click on here and add to asset gallery, boom, we've got this nice thing we can use in the layout LOP. So that has saved, and what I've got, let me think, what I've got down here, let's just take a look, is an asset reference which is linked to the output of this, just so I can, whoops, sorry about that, I can just switch this over to the cached version and just make sure that is actually exploring the variants correctly, and I'll just put them in the middle like so. So yeah, so there you go. So now we can do something with the asset. So I could plug that excuse me, that asset reference in here. So we've got the asset in the LOP network. Here it is, asteroid A, and it's named because I've named it this, like so, and it's just linked to the output of this. Normally you wouldn't need to link it because you might be giving this to someone else, so they just pick this up from disk. And then we can plug this in, and I'm going to configure a layer to save this out to, and you can create a explore variants again. So this time you can explore all the variants like so, and we can create a collection like so, and then I've got this random color on here which will show the display color just so I can see something later on, and then I'll instance them. So you can see quickly you can get quite a lot for free. It's pretty clever. So the instance setup is again just a standard thing. It's not about the instance in here. It's small actually, but essentially I've got a grid, and I popped a mountain on that, give it some normals, I scattered the points, and then I've just done a randomization. Sometimes I like to tweak the seed here. I've created an ID for each point, and that's kind of, I always do that just in case I need it for anything. I've got this attribute here which is actually going to try and randomly control an attribute that I've found that I promoted in the material. So and I'm sidelining quite a bit now, but it's in the material, and I may have got it in here, and it's this guy, and it's just controlling the height. So I was just trying to do some randomization of the height, but it's just a point that you can randomize attributes that you promote within the materials here as well, in material X. I'm just pressing U twice. So back in the instancer, I'm just adding the old random p scale in there like so. And if for some reason, I don't know why, I thought it would show the instances at this point in the viewport, and I'm not sure if I've done something wrong. I am on my Mac, but it's not doing it. So, and I feel like I've seen that happening before. So display particles as points, or I can say lit spheres, so you can kind of see the like a rough bounding box of what they should look like. If I press U, you should see like roughly, hopefully the same shape. I think we're changing from SOP level to LOP level doing that, and it can be a bit jarring. So I'm just randomizing normals and just relaxing, and then just created a noise pattern across them like that, and then I've just deleted some of those points using the noise just to give something interesting, and then I'm just randomly culling those points once more again. So I'm not sure if you caught any of that, but that's the vex I wrote just to grab an attribute and excuse me, and do a threshold delete, so I can delete the highest level of the noise or the lowest level, and I can invert it. Nothing too special there, and it's quite nice sometimes. And I've got a random cull, which again is basically going to almost remove it based on the ID attribute that I did. So again, instancing things, yeah, it's it's another topic. And then I've got some code to spin particles based on the p scale, so things will spin a little bit quicker. You probably won't, because these are just perfectly round. You probably might see them wobbling around a little bit, because I've got some noise on there as well, just to kind of, but you won't see them rotating. I think you have to view the origin, which it's quite small, I think, in this scene. Yeah, you can see them spin. I think you can make that bigger. But otherwise, you can just press U, and you could see them spinning around, doing something funky in there like that. Again, that's not the idea. This is not what this tutorial is about. So yeah, so I know I put them into the asset layout gallery, and currently I haven't used them. I'm just using the asset reference node here and bringing that in and doing some scattering. But you might want to now bring these in and use those with the layout LOP and things like that. So you can do that with a, like, this is probably going to not work now, but I'm going to just drop down the layout node here, and I'm going to try to press enter, and I'm going to reset all the changes. And this little teddy bear will literally open up this, I think it'll open up this UI and allow me to select them all and add. So now I've got these. The one thing I don't like about this is the size that they make these. We could just provide a list and a select all functionality, I think, unless I'm missing something like Shift A or something. Nope. But you have to kind of select all these, which can be a bit annoying, and I haven't really found a way to do that more efficiently. But that might just be my, I very rarely use the layout LOP, but it's really cool. It reminds me of Vue landscape generation software. That was really cool. So I'll just do like stacks. So I think if I zoom in, I think if I do stacks, will that? Yes. So I can just do stacks of things. So I'm not really sure why the textures disappear. They like appear there. It might be because to do with like them being point instances. I press enter and it's done. And I press escape to come out of that. That's not particularly useful. So yeah, so we should now have that, and then we can randomly find that node, and you could select. Let's see if I can do this. I may have named them slightly different to when I was doing this test. I might. Yeah, so if you control click on this, I think you can select this like that, and then do a wildcard, and then you can randomize the materials on them. I'm not sure why it's gone funky like that. I don't know why. It's working earlier. I just reset the viewport and press W. I wonder if they, let's see what they do when I render. So what's happening now is, because I'm rendering the assets that are in the library for the first time, the wrap files have been generated, I would imagine. So I'd imagine my textures in here now have like accompanying rats. Yeah, there they are. So that's what the delay was. My MacBook Air, it's the low spec one, isn't really great, and I feel like this feels a bit buggy as well, but it was working. I'm not entirely sure why that's not. You can see them like trying to display, and I think that's just my machine. So I wonder if they are point instances. I wonder if they were inspo references. That's going to be a bit more randomization in there. It looks like some of them are not randomizing. I'm not entirely sure why. Or maybe they are. Let me... Oh yeah, I'd have to change that now. So I guess we could automate that with a... Oh, I see. Yeah, I didn't randomize... Oh yeah, I didn't randomize everything in here, did I? So I would have to do that. And then we should get just randomization off of this. Anyway, that, yeah, I don't know, that kind of works, I guess. And then you can stick this in a basic lighting scene. So the asteroids, for example, you can see that I've got them rendering here. They're quite small, but they'll render fine. I haven't set anything up for this tutorial, to be honest. I just wanted to talk about the doing something with the USDs and trying to do some automation from disk. And I guess you could do what I did before and put this into a top network and have a live SOP network generating wedges and things. So they're really small instances, aren't they? I have created some crypto mats as well in here. I think the tutorial's finished now, so you can bugger off. But that's basically it. I've created the variant attribute, and I think if you look here, you can see the variant, so you can see how many geometry variants I've got in there. So I could find those if I kind of use that crypto mat in a compositor like Fusion or Nuke or whatever supports crypto mats. And then I've done one for IDs, which is the point, the attribute I created on the point. So these are attributes I created on the point, and I'm just bringing them in. As long as they're a string or an integer, you can bring them in to represent this like crypto mat ID. So there's the random one, and then there's this kind of standard ones, which are the primitives and the I wish they'd move this to somewhere. So there's the crypto primitives and then the crypto materials, and then I did one called group as well, which is the kind, and I just used the group to see what that would look like, and I think that would just give me a crypto map for every individual group as well. So they don't take very long to render, so it might be worth just chucking those in if you're doing a lot of variation. So there's the group. Yeah, so that was my discovery last night. I'm not using that. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll stick this up on my Patreon for all my free members, and anybody can get this if you just become a free member. Just have a look, and if you've got any feedback or any other improvements, please share with me, because I'm still learning this as well. So I hope this was helpful in any way. I probably will come back in a few days with a better version. But yeah, thanks for your time, everyone, and take care. If you're finding this tutorial useful, why not drop a like and let me know in the comments. And if you're into learning more Houdini, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next tutorial.